solution. And lots of brushing. You can change Magic Curl's hair.
Airtight plastic containers that keep good foods fresher.
Do you ever miss those unmistakable things from the 1980s? The ones that made growing up in America feel like something special? These moments, routines, and everyday items shaped how we lived, laughed, and made do with what we had. When did all the best parts of life become memories? Back in the 1980s, the youngest kid in the room was the remote control. That was your job. You would be halfway through your cereal, and someone, usually your dad, would yell, "Change it to Channel 5!" And just like that, you were up and across the room, twisting a chunky knob that clicked like it was built by a car mechanic. Sometimes the knob was broken and you used pliers. Sometimes the channel skipped. Sometimes the picture rolled and you had to slap the side of the television. You were not just the remote, you were the tech support, holding the antenna, squinting at static, getting yelled at when you went too far. You memorized what shows came on what channels, not because you wanted to, but because they made you. You learned how to hold the rabbit ears in that one perfect angle for the clearest signal. You timed commercial breaks like a pro and knew when to switch fast. And you always got blamed when the picture went fuzzy, even if it was the weather. That little moment of panic before switching to the wrong channel? Pure pressure. It was a weird kind of honor. Everyone relied on you. You had the power to ruin or rescue movie night. There was no pause button, no instant replay, and if you got it wrong, everyone saw it. But when you nailed it, perfect channel, perfect signal. You got a nod of approval and maybe got to sit back down for 5 minutes. Today, everything is voice-controlled and instant. But there was something about being part of the ritual, the chaos, the commands, the family TV politics. Being the remote meant you were in the mix. And you miss it more than you think. You did not need a toy room. You had a couch. And the second those cushions came off, you had a fort, a base, a hideout, a spaceship, a castle, whatever you needed it to be. You flipped cushions on their side, grabbed the scratchiest blankets you owned, and started construction. You anchored things with encyclopedias, slid under like a ninja, and defended your territory with a flashlight and some crackers. No one could enter unless they knew the password. If it collapsed, you rebuilt it. Better, stronger. There were no blueprints, just imagination and leftover furniture. One side was always lopsided, but that just made it more exciting. The flashlight barely worked, so you brought in candles until your mom saw and lost her mind. Sometimes you had secret snacks hidden under the cushions, like crackers or fruit chews from the bottom of a lunchbox. You used your shoes as booby traps and dared your siblings to challenge your throne. It was never just a fort. It was your entire world for the afternoon. Your mom would walk in, sigh, and let you keep going, as long as it did not block the TV. And at the end of the day, you put it all back just in time for dinner. There was something special about how a couch could become whatever you dreamed up. You did not care about toys. You cared about the space you made, and the fact that you made it yourself. Today, kids have touchscreens and digital worlds, but you had blankets, cushions, and a mission. And honestly, it felt like enough. The instructions said 1 cup of sugar, but your mom said half. That was the rule. That was the budget. So you dumped in half a cup, stirred it like a wizard with a wooden spoon, and hoped for the best. What you got was not sweet. It was sharp, tart, the kind of drink that made your jaw clench and your eyes water. But somehow, it still hit the spot. It stained your upper lip, stuck in your teeth, and lingered in your throat like a challenge. You drank it like you earned it, and maybe you did. The KoolAid was part refreshment, part dare. The cherry was dangerous, the grape was unpredictable, and the lemonade straight up assaulted your tongue. Sometimes the powder clumped at the bottom like a science experiment gone wrong. You still poured more because that was flavor, not failure. When the jug ran out, you scraped the sides like it was gold. And if you ever got the full sugar version, it was almost too sweet to handle. You filled plastic cups with it, left rings on the table, and felt like summer was in full swing. Sometimes you froze it into weird, jagged popsicles. Sometimes you chugged it straight from the pitcher. And every flavor felt like a new experience. Cherry, grape, tropical punch. They all burned a little. But that was the point. Today, everything is sugar-free and carefully balanced. But back then, a pitcher of weak KoolAid was a rite of passage, and we would not change a thing. She was not Barbie, but she was close enough. Her name was Fashion Doll, and you found her hanging near the registers at the drugstore. Same long legs, same blonde hair, same general shape, but a lot jankier. Her knees did not bend, her shoes did not fit, her arms were permanently bent like she was always halfway into a wave. You brushed her hair until it turned into a nest. You named her something dramatic like Crystal or Tiffany. She had no dream house, she slept in a shoebox, and you loved her anyway. Sometimes her leg popped off and you just popped it right back on. If she fell in the bathtub, she became a mermaid, instantly. Her wardrobe was a collection of sock scraps and hair ties. Her life was chaos, drama, and kitchen table makeovers. And somehow, she was more fun than anything that came in a pink box. She got married to G.I. Joe. She dated He-Man. She went on adventures through the laundry basket and got her face painted with your mom's leftover makeup. She was yours. The real Barbie was expensive. This one came with one outfit and a mysterious scent. But she was part of your world. Every stain, every broken limb, every glittery outfit you cut from an old sock, that was love. And honestly, sometimes the off-brand dolls had more personality because you gave it to them. You wanted to be a robot, but all you had was a paper bag and some tape. So you made it work. Cut out eye holes, drew on some dials, and stuck it on your head like a knight's helmet. That was Halloween in the 1980s. No store-bought deluxe costumes, no LED lights or muscle suits, just whatever your parents could throw together with glue and desperation. You were a mummy made from toilet paper, a ninja in your dad's old black t-shirt, a ghost in a sheet that smelled like the linen closet. And you were proud of it. Every wrinkle, every crooked line, it was your costume. You held it together with staples and crossed your fingers. The wind blew half of it off by the third house, but you kept going. Your candy bag ripped? No problem. You used your hoodie pocket. Your mask fogged up your glasses and made you walk into a bush. And you laughed the whole way home. You trick-or-treated with a pillowcase and got candy from neighbors who called you creative. You could barely breathe. You could barely see. But you were outside, in the cold, on a mission. And you did not need to spend $50 to do it. Today, Halloween feels like a catalog. Back then, it felt like chaos. And that is exactly what made it fun. Air conditioning was for rich people. You had a fan. A big box fan shoved into the window, buzzing like a wasp and blowing hot air directly into your face. But you told yourself it was working. And sometimes it almost did. You rotated it between bedrooms like a sacred artifact. Whoever got the fan that night? Chosen. You slept like royalty while your siblings sweated in silence. Sometimes it would rattle against the window frame like it was trying to escape. You stuck an old sock or crumpled newspaper in the gap to stop the draft. It never really helped, but it made you feel like an engineer. When the fan turned slightly and hit you square in the face, that was the jackpot. The hum of the blades became your lullaby. You stuck your face in front of it and talked like a robot. It was entertainment and survival in one loud metal box. If it fell over, it sounded like a car crash. If it stopped working, you were doomed. But it lasted through heat waves, thunderstorms, and whatever the summer threw at you. Today, we set thermostats to perfect numbers. But in the 1980s, your comfort was decided by the fan's direction, and maybe a bowl of ice in front of it. It was not fancy, it was not healthy. But when you were hungry and unsupervised, nothing beat curling up a slice of bologna in the microwave. You dropped it on a paper towel, pressed the button, and watched as the edges started to rise like a flower blooming in a lunchroom. It sizzled. It snapped. It smelled weird and amazing. Sometimes it curled so high, the middle puffed up like a balloon. You did not need a timer. Your nose told you when it was ready. The microwave light flickered like it was in on the drama. One side was always crispier than the other, and that was just fine. You folded it up like a taco or slapped it between crackers if you were feeling gourmet. And if you burned it, you ate it anyway. You poked it with a fork and called it science. You slapped it between two slices of bread, maybe added ketchup, and felt like a chef. It was salt, fat, heat, all the good things in one floppy slice. And yes, you always burned your tongue. Bologna was survival food, easy to store, impossible to mess up. Kids knew how to cook it before they could spell it. Today's kids have air fryers and avocado toast. We had microwave meat, and we were happy. It was not Lucky Charms, it was marshmallow magic, not Fruit Loops, Fruity Circles, and they came in a bag so big you could barely carry it to the cart. No box, no prize, just an avalanche of sweet, crunchy imitation goodness. The mascots were strangers. The flavors were close but not quite right. You had to clip the top with a chip bag clip and pray it stayed fresh. And somehow, it was better because it was yours. You opened the bag like it was filled with treasure. Every bowl felt like a sugar jackpot. You poured until it overflowed, ignoring the serving size like everyone else. Sometimes the bag was so big it did not even fit in the cabinet, so it lived on the floor, like royalty. You ate 3 bowls and felt like a king. Your mom bought it because it was cheaper, you ate it because it was amazing. Even when the colors bled together and the marshmallows turned to dust, you loved every bite. Saturday morning cartoons, a bowl of knockoff cereal, a kitchen chair that creaked under you. That was living. When winter rolled in, the whole family migrated to one room, the only one with a heater, usually the living room. You dragged out blankets, sleeping bags, and maybe even a mattress. Everyone layered up like it was Everest. It was cold everywhere else. You did not want to go to the bathroom. You did not want to move. You huddled together, shoulder to shoulder, whispering until you fell asleep. If someone had to pee, they made a break for it like a soldier behind enemy lines. You could see your breath. You piled socks over socks, then wrapped your feet in a towel. The dog curled up with whoever had the most body heat, and no one dared touch the thermostat. You played cards under the quilt, watched reruns, tried not to argue over space, and hoped the heater would not cut out. It clanged, it rattled, but it kept the cold at bay. For that one night, sometimes for the whole winter, the living room became your world. Today, we control our climate by phone. Back then, you controlled it by proximity, and somehow it brought everyone closer. You thought you were getting ice cream. What you got was a frozen block of disappointment. Off-brand, rock hard, vanilla in name only. You had to leave it on the counter just to get a spoon in, and when you did, it came out like icy plaster. It crunched. It stung your teeth. It had the texture of frozen glue. But once it softened, pure magic. You learned to carve it with the side of a spoon like you were digging for fossils. The vanilla tasted more like cold than anything else. You added chocolate syrup, not to enhance the flavor, but to survive it. Sometimes it had freezer burn so bad it looked like snow, but it was all part of the charm. You drowned it in syrup, sprinkles, whatever it took, because that was dessert and it was yours. You sat on the couch with your bowl, fighting through every bite, and somehow it still hit the spot. It was never creamy, never rich, but it was frozen, sweet, and made summer feel like summer. You did not pick them for style. You wore them because they were there. Long, thick white tube socks with double stripes at the top, pulled up past the shin, paired with shorts, sneakers, or whatever else was clean. It was not a look. It was a default. They were hand-me-downs, rolled up in drawers and always slightly stretched out. Some had holes in the toe. Some were stained from who knows what. But they worked. And they were comfortable too. You wore them to school, to play, to mow the lawn, or to ride bikes down the street. And every kid looked the same. Socks like goalposts, flapping shoelaces, and a face full of popsicle. There was no pressure to be cool. You just were. Because you showed up. You played hard. And your socks took the beating. By the end of the day, they were scrunched down at your ankles, dirty at the heel, and clinging to life. But the next morning, you pulled them right back up and did it all again. Today, socks are fashion statements. Back then, they were just long and ready. The taller, the better. The stripes? Pure status. And even now, when you see a pair of those classic tube socks, Something in your brain says, yep, that's what a real sock looks like. No snow boots? No problem. You had bread bags. They were the go-to hack for kids growing up without fancy footwear for winter weather. Before going outside, your mom would hand you 2 plastic bread bags and tell you to put them over your socks, inside your shoes. It was weird. It was loud, but it kept your feet dry, mostly. You would walk to school crinkling with every step. The bags would bunch up, your toes would sweat, and somehow they still felt warmer than regular socks alone. Wonder Bread, Sunbeam, store brand with faded printing. Whatever you had, it became insulation. Some families even saved bags year-round just for winter use. If they tore, you patched them with tape. You learned how to pull them on like gloves for your feet, tucking the tops into your pant legs so the snow did not sneak in. It was low-tech, high ingenuity. The other kids might have laughed until their socks were soaked and yours were bone dry. And when you came inside at the end of the day, you hung them to dry right next to your boots. That smell of warm plastic? That meant you made it. Today's kids have waterproof liners, thermal soles, and Gore-Tex. You had a bag that once held white bread, and it worked. That kind of clever homespun solution is something we do not see as much anymore. And honestly, we should. Everyone knew the lie. You pulled a Cool Whip tub from the fridge, popped the lid, expecting dessert, and boom. Mashed potatoes, pinto beans, sometimes chili. The betrayal hit hard, but by the 3rd time, you stopped getting your hopes up. Because that was the Tupperware. Cool Whip tubs, margarine bowls, ice cream buckets turned soup storage. You reused what you had, and you made it work. No one owned matching sets. Instead, your leftovers were packed in a patchwork of brand logos and permanent marker labels. Some had melted edges from the microwave. Others had lids that never quite fit, so you had to wrap a rubber band around them or stack something heavy on top. It was chaos. It was genius. It was exactly what we had. These tubs showed up at school potlucks, family reunions, and on the picnic table at every barbecue. You always brought them home, even if they were empty. And the rule? Never throw one out. They were practically heirlooms. Your mom had a whole shelf dedicated to saved containers. It was like Tupperware, but free, and just as reliable. Today, we have matching sets with locking lids and measuring guides, but they do not hold the same kind of memory. A Cool Whip container in the fridge was not just storage. It was a sign you were making things stretch. And for a lot of families, that was everything. You did not own a North Face jacket. You owned layers, lots of them. When the cold hit, your strategy was simple. Wear everything. Pajama pants under jeans, 3 t-shirts under a hoodie, gloves on top of mittens, hats under hoods. You waddled out the door like a burrito with arms. You could not bend your knees, you could barely zip your coat, but you were warm. And that was all that mattered. You sat on the school bus sweating by the time you got to the 3rd stop, but outside, you were a warrior. Snowball fights, sledding, walking uphill both ways somehow. You learned how to layer like a survivalist. Each article of clothing played its part. You even wrapped scarves around your face so tight, your voice came out muffled and fogged up your glasses. There was no shame. Everyone looked ridiculous. You could not see anyone's outfit anyway, just the eyes, maybe a nose. It was like fashion hibernation. Today, kids have thermal-lined parkas and digital heating socks. But back then, winter survival was DIY. You did not look good, you looked ready. And that kind of layered-up determination? That is something worth missing. Television in the 1980s was a gamble, static, rolling screens, channels that faded in and out like a ghost trying to speak. The fix? A wire hanger. You bent it, twisted it, and jammed it into the antenna port in the back of your television. If that did not work, you added foil, or balanced it on a stack of books, or made someone hold it mid-air while everyone else watched. Right there! Do not move! Someone always became the human antenna. You would sit sideways, arm outstretched, trying to hold the signal just long enough to finish the show. It was uncomfortable. It was ridiculous. And it was the only way to see what happened next on Knight Rider. You tried everything: coat hangers, forks, bobby pins, anything metal that could grab the signal just a little better. When it worked, it felt like a miracle, a small victory against the forces of analog chaos. Today, we have satellite, streaming, perfect picture in high definition. But there was something about the unpredictability back then. You never knew if the picture would hold, and that made it all the more special when it did. You did not choose your shampoo. You were assigned it. Usually whatever was cheapest, half-used, or left behind by a relative. Sometimes the bottle had no label. Sometimes it was mystery liquid in an old conditioner bottle. You just flipped the cap and hoped it did not burn. Some smelled like plastic, some like perfume, some like lemon floor cleaner, and all of them stung like fire if you got them in your eyes. You learned how to shampoo with your head tilted way back, avoiding the dreaded soap sting. No one used tear-free formulas, just a towel to the face and a warning to be careful next time. But your hair? Clean. Maybe squeaky, maybe a little stiff, but clean. That was the only goal. Some bottles sat in the corner of the tub for years, just rotating through the family. If it lathered, it worked. If it was half frozen from being stored near a window, you warmed it up in your hands and said nothing. It was not about the brand. It was about getting the job done. Now, shampoo is full of oils, scents, and promises. Back then, it just needed to bubble and not smell like gasoline. Before you had toys, you had cardboard tubes, toilet paper rolls, paper towel rolls, anything round, cleanish, and waiting to be transformed. You taped them together into swords, painted them into robots, cut slits into them, and made tiny television sets or tunnels for marbles. They were poor man's Legos, and they worked just fine. You raided the trash for art supplies, cereal boxes, egg cartons, string. Your toolbox was a junk drawer in your imagination. You made binoculars, rockets, bracelets. You held them up to your eye and saw a new world every time. They ripped, they sagged, they fell apart. But you never stopped. You just made more. It kept your hands busy, your brain humming, and your heart full. There was pride in it. Not because it looked perfect, but because you made it. Today, kids have 3D printers. You had scissors, tape, and a toilet paper tube. And somehow, your crafts still felt just as cool. Those sandwich bags were not throwaways. They were long-term investments. You would eat your sandwich, shake out the crumbs, and hand the bag to your mom. She would rinse it out in the sink, hang it upside down on a spoon, and let it air dry by the window. By day 4, the plastic was cloudy. By day 7, the zip seal barely worked. But that bag, still going. Holding grapes one day, pretzels the next. You never questioned it. It was just what you did. Waste not, want not. And honestly, it made sense. Plastic bags cost money, so you used them until they cracked, tore, or dissolved in your backpack. Even then, your mom might tape it shut and give it one more shot. There was a weird kind of respect for those bags, like they had seniority in the kitchen. Today, everything is disposable. Back then, a sandwich bag was a survivor. It saw things. It held things. And it taught you that durability is not just in the design, it is in the effort. You never met the cousin, but you wore their clothes. They lived in another state. You were not even sure how you were related. But one day, a big garbage bag or cardboard box showed up. Inside, t-shirts from a county fair you never attended, jeans 2 sizes too big, and sweaters with initials that were not yours. It smelled like attic. It looked like a mystery. And you wore it all like it was gold. You rolled sleeves, pinned pants, and hoped the neighbor kids did not ask questions. But even if they did, who cared? You had new clothes, and they were free. Some stuff fit, some did not. Some was too weird even for you. But every item was tried on, modeled, and judged in front of the mirror. It was a whole event. And if you found one good sweatshirt in the pile, that was a win. Today, kids get everything brand new. But there was something humble, honest, and quietly exciting about a box full of someone else's past. Because in that pile, there was always one piece waiting to become part of your story. The metal tray was magic. It clanged, it shimmered, and it held dinner like a promise. Salisbury steak in one corner, mashed potatoes in another, a brownie or apple crumble in the middle, and peas, always peas. You did not microwave it, you baked it for 45 minutes, and you stared through the oven door the whole time. You ate it on a tray table, in front of the television, feet dangling, forks scraping the bottom of the foil. The brownie always burned at the edges. The potatoes were dry, but the whole thing tasted like a treat, like an event. It was not just food, it was TV dinner. The packaging was heavy, the foil had weight, and it separated everything so precisely it felt like you were eating a first-class airplane meal on your own couch. Today's frozen meals are plastic, flimsy, and forgettable. But those metal trays, they meant something. They made dinner feel like something worth waiting for. You were halfway through tearing into a birthday present when someone said it. Wait, save the paper! Everything paused. Suddenly, that loud, satisfying rip you were about to make had to turn into a careful surgical peel. The tape came off slowly. The corners were gently unfolded. And that sheet of wrapping paper? It was going in the drawer. Your mom had a drawer for it, or a box, or a grocery bag packed with already used wrapping paper, folded with the care of national documents. Some pieces had been reused so many times, the creases had creases, and you recognized them year after year, like old friends. The really good stuff, the foil kind, or the ones with glitter, was the holy grail. Those were saved no matter how many pieces of tape were holding them together. Every piece mattered, not just because of the budget, but because throwing away something perfectly usable was unheard of. That was wasteful. You smoothed it out on your lap, flattened it on the kitchen table with the side of your hand. And when it was folded, it went back in the stash, ready for the next birthday, holiday, or emergency gift wrap situation. Bows and ribbons got saved too. You peeled the tape off the back of the gift tag and tucked that away like treasure. Today, we tear and toss without thinking. But back then, wrapping paper was treated like a resource. And somehow, those reused scraps made the gift feel even more thoughtful. There is nothing quite like a duct-taped couch. You could walk into a living room and immediately know how long that family had been through it. It started with a small rip on the armrest. Nothing major. Just wear and tear from someone sliding off it one too many times. Then it spread. The cushion cracked. The vinyl peeled. The stuffing peeked out like insulation. And that was when the duct tape came in. One strip, then two. Then an entire patchwork quilt of silver tape covering years of snack crumbs, cat scratches, and wrestling matches. It never matched, but no one expected it to. The more tape, the more character. And it squeaked every time you sat down. That couch held movie nights, sick days, and late-night talks. It was the unofficial center of the house. It sagged in the middle. One side was your dad's spot. The other was just wide enough for two siblings if no one complained. And the duct tape? That was just part of the design. Guests did not ask questions. Kids peeled it off and got in trouble. But it kept the couch alive for another year. Another memory. Another snack-filled Saturday afternoon. Today, furniture gets replaced when the color fades. But back then, you fixed it. You patched it. You made it last. And you learned that comfort does not come from perfect fabric. It comes from sitting in the same spot every day, taped corner and all. Back in the 80s, you did not throw away jeans just because they ripped. You fixed them. Usually with a trip to the fabric store, a pair of iron-on knee pads, and a whole lot of patience. These patches came in packs, stiff and scratchy, with colors that almost matched your denim, if you squinted. Your mom would dig out the iron, grab a towel, and press down like she was flattening a mountain. You held your breath the whole time. The patch stuck. Maybe. The edges curled. The glue bubbled. But somehow, they lasted. Once they were on, those jeans became invincible. You could climb fences, skid on the sidewalk, and still come home with both knees intact. Sure, you walked a little funny. Those patches had zero stretch, but they did the job. And you felt proud of it. Like your jeans had leveled up. Each patch was proof you lived. that you played hard, that you were not afraid to fall. Some kids had patches in different colors, like badges of honor. Others tried to decorate them with fabric markers or puff paint. That never worked, but it made them yours. Today, ripped jeans cost more than fixed ones. But back then, you wore your repairs like a story. And every time you felt that stiff rectangle under your knee, you remembered what it meant. These jeans are not done yet. You did not complain when your shoes got holes. You grabbed a cereal box, Corn Flakes, Rice Krispies, whatever was empty and not sticky. You flattened it, traced your foot, and cut out an insole like you were working in a shoe factory. Then you slipped it inside your sneaker like it was state-of-the-art cushioning. It felt weird. It made a crunch when you walked, and it never lasted longer than a few days. But it got you through. And that was the point. Some kids layered 2 or 3 pieces. Some taped them to their socks. Others just dealt with the flap of a busted sole and hoped for dry weather. You learned to walk gently, to avoid puddles, and to make do. Cardboard was your secret weapon. It bought you time until the next pair of hand-me-downs, until your mom could find a deal, until you saved enough to buy your own. You never told anyone what was inside your shoes. But if they knew, they would not have laughed. They would have nodded in respect, because everyone had been there. Today, we throw away shoes for a loose thread. But back then, you patched them, patted them, and kept going. And that cardboard? It was more than a fix. It was resilience in disguise. Subtlety was not invited to the party in the 1980s, especially not when it came to pants. You had electric yellow, flaming orange, pants so bright they could be spotted from space, and that was the goal. These were not fashion statements, they were declarations. You were here, you were loud, and you loved it. They clashed with your shirt, your shoes, and probably your skin tone. They made you look like a highlighter with legs. And you wore them with confidence, because back then, confidence was half the outfit, and the other half was polyester. These pants had personality. Sometimes they had pleats. Sometimes they had that strange, swishy fabric that made noise every time you moved. You wore them to school, to the roller rink, to the mall. People noticed. That was the point. There was no such thing as too much in the 80s, just not enough. Your pants were your mood ring. They shouted even when you were quiet. Today, everything is neutral. Earth tones, minimalist, safe. But back then, your pants were loud, proud, and unforgettable. You might laugh at the photos now, but deep down, you miss being that bold, that fearless, that fluorescent. There was no group chat, no endless scrolling. If you wanted to be social, you went to the mall. That was the rule. You got dropped off with $10, maybe $20 if your parents were feeling generous, and you made it last. You walked in with your friends, hit the food court, then circled back 3 more times like it was some sort of sacred ritual. You did not need a plan, just vibes. Sometimes you bought nothing. Sometimes you bought pretzels and a $5 necklace that turned your neck green. That was the mall experience. Arcades, music stores, that one kiosk with lava lamps and mood rings. Everything smelled like cinnamon and new clothes. You tried on outfits you could not afford, sprayed too much cologne at the tester wall, and took glamour shots in the photo booth. You checked out the cute kids from school and hoped they saw you first. It was freedom and boredom rolled into one. You spent hours doing absolutely nothing, and it was perfect. Your ride came at 6, and when the car pulled up, you swore you had not been there that long. But you had, and you loved every minute of it. You remember this. Polyester leisure suits were loud, shiny, and unapologetically bold. They were not just clothing, they were a state of mind. Wearing one meant you were not afraid to stand out, to sweat a little, to dance a lot. These suits shimmered under disco lights, turned heads at the roller rink, and clung to your every move. They were not comfortable, they were not breathable, but they were unforgettable. The cut was wide, the collars were wider, and the colors ranged from banana cream to burnt orange. Every department store carried them. Every television dad had one. Every uncle wore one to a wedding. They were like armor for extroverts, flashy, fearless, and fun. You were not blending in. You were making an entrance before you even opened your mouth. They were the uniform of a generation trying to find cool in chaos. And for a brief window, they were it. Today, they are costume shop punchlines, but they once made people feel slick, sharp, and modern. They were part rebellion, part performance, part polyester fantasy. Why did we ever let go of a style that dared us to be this loud on purpose? In the 80s, getting fit was not just about health. It was about style. It was about glory. Aerobics hit America like a high kick to the face, and suddenly, everyone was sweating in sync to pulsing beats and neon spandex. Jane Fonda led the charge. Her workout tapes were gospel. Living rooms became fitness studios. Leotards, sweatbands, leg warmers. This was not just exercise. It was performance. You did not just move, you burned. And you looked good doing it. Celebrities jumped on the trend. Gyms popped up everywhere. And for the first time, people wanted to be active and look fabulous while doing it. This was not a grim treadmill march. It was a dance. A celebration of energy, movement, and control. The 80s made fitness feel like fashion and made health feel fun. Men joined too, in cut-off shirts and short shorts, lifting weights in front of full-length mirrors. Aerobics videos sold by the millions. They were pop culture events, right up there with hit sitcoms and blockbuster movies. Fitness was in. Everyone was chasing that sculpted, sweat-glazed look. It was a movement, a mantra. And underneath the glitter and the bouncing was something real, a desire to take charge of your body, your mood, and your destiny. The Nerf ball was not just a toy, it was permission. Permission to throw, jump, chase, and tackle indoors without worrying about broken windows or bruised siblings. When it launched in 1969, it quietly revolutionized playtime in the 1970s. This soft, squishy ball, usually bright orange or yellow, was more than foam. It was freedom. For kids stuck indoors during rainy days or cold winters, the Nerf ball turned living rooms into stadiums. It was tossed down hallways, bounced off walls, smacked off ceilings, and it never hurt anyone. That was its genius. It let kids be rowdy without consequences. No one had to yell, "Not in the house," anymore. Suddenly, tag became dodgeball. A lazy Sunday became a full-blown game of catch. And for many kids, it was the first time a ball felt safe. It was something even little siblings could join in on. Parents accepted it, teachers tolerated it, kids lived for it. The Nerf ball was not flashy. It did not talk or light up. But it had this perfect bounce, this perfect softness, and it never failed to make playtime better. In a world full of do not touch, Nerf was the one thing kids were always allowed to grab and throw as hard as they could. These bikes were not just transportation, they were declarations of freedom. Bright colors, high handlebars, chrome fenders that caught the sun like disco balls, and that signature banana seat, long enough for two, slick enough to slide off if you hit a pothole. These bikes were paraded like trophies. You would cruise the neighborhood, your tall plastic flag flapping behind you like you were leading a one-kid parade. The flags were not there for safety. They were there for flair. Some even had tassels or lightning bolt decals. If you had a horn or a handlebar mirror, you were royalty. And if your parents sprang for a gear shift, forget it. You were unstoppable. Kids traded stickers, raced down hills, and popped wheelies like daredevils. Scraped knees were a badge of honor. Riding these bikes felt like flying, even if the only thing airborne was your ego. They made you feel older, cooler, bolder. And no matter how cheap or beat up they got, you never wanted to let them go. They were part bicycle, part identity. And if yours had a glitter seat, you were basically a celebrity. You were not successful in the 1970s unless you were yelling into a car phone the size of a loaf of bread. Before voicemail, before call waiting, before anything digital, you got the beep. A busy signal meant someone was already on the line, and that was that. No leaving a message, no callback cue. Just the sound of rejection, 3 beeps per second. If you were trying to reach your friend during dinner hour, good luck. Their older sibling was probably already hogging the line. You hung up, waited, tried again. Sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for 20. And then when it finally rang, you held your breath, hoping it would not go busy again. That sound was the soundtrack of being young and needing to talk. You learned patience. You learned persistence. You also learned to slam the receiver in frustration when it just would not go through. Parents were always yelling about someone being on the phone too long. Hang up! Someone might be trying to call! And guess what? They were. It was you. Waiting. Hoping. That sound, flat and relentless, was burned into your brain like a ringtone from the past. It was the sound of wanting something and not getting it, yet still calling back anyway. Listening to the beep, beep, beep of a time before multitasking. If you ever felt that sting of calling 20 times and never getting through, you remember this. The chatter telephone by Fisher-Price was more than a toy. It was a rite of passage. Long before smartphones and screen time, toddlers dragged this smiling, wide-eyed friend behind them like a badge of growing up. It clacked as it rolled, its rotary dial spinning with every giggle and grab. Children pretended to make calls, mimicking parents with absolute seriousness, pressing plastic receivers to their ears and speaking into the world. It was not electronic. It made no real calls, but it was powerful. Because it gave kids something adults had: control, conversation, importance. It was not just play, it was practice. With every pretend conversation, a child rehearsed how to be heard. Every child who played with it was rehearsing a future where they would matter. The clicking eyes, the ringing bell, the chunky plastic body, it was built to survive anything. And most did. Decades later, many are still found in attics, dusted with time but still smiling. For a generation, the chatter telephone was the first introduction to technology, play, and imagination, long before those things were ever separate. Why does one of our earliest toys still feel more human than the phones we carry today? They were not just dolls, they were your children, adopted, named, cared for like living, breathing extensions of your heart. Cabbage Patch Kids exploded into American homes like nothing else before them. Chubby cheeks, yarn hair, signed bottoms, they were adorable and slightly strange. But they were yours. No two were the same. That was the magic. It felt personal, like fate. Parents fought in department stores to get them. Shelves emptied in seconds. News clips showed grown adults wrestling over plush plastic babies. It was not just a toy. It was a phenomenon. And it swept through the country like a fever dream. Kids brought them everywhere, to school, to bed, to dinner. They came with birth certificates and backstories, turning playtime into family drama. In an age of make-believe, these dolls made things feel real. The craze might sound ridiculous today, but in the moment, it was everything. A doll you had to adopt? That was not just marketing, it was genius. It made you feel responsible, important, part of something. And when the madness faded, what was left was a memory of wide-eyed joy, pure affection, and a little friend who made childhood feel alive. There was something magical about a Saturday morning where math and grammar danced across your screen to a killer beat. Schoolhouse Rock was the rare mix of educational and unforgettable. Launched in the early 1970s, these animated shorts played during cartoon blocks, slipping in lessons between episodes of superheroes and slapstick. But they did not feel like school. They felt like music videos made just for kids, catchy, colorful, and endlessly clever. Conjunction Junction, I'm Just a Bill, 3 is a magic number. These were not just songs, they were memory hooks, hooks that stayed with you for life. Even now, adults who grew up in that era can still sing every word. That is how deep it went. That is how much it mattered. Schoolhouse Rock did not just teach facts, it taught confidence. You could walk into class knowing what an adverb was, not because of your teacher, but because a cartoon train told you so. And you believed it. It gave kids ownership of knowledge. It made learning feel cool. In a time before digital everything, it was one of the first shows to prove that entertainment could be smart without being boring. It was a soundtrack to childhood that made your brain sing. Roller disco was beautiful chaos. You showed up in a sparkling outfit, maybe a sequin vest, some bell-bottoms, and enough glitter to blind an entire crowd. Then you strapped wheels to your feet and danced in the dark. What could go wrong? Everything. Someone always tripped on a loose lace. Someone else lost control during a backward spin. And before you knew it, bam! You were part of a 4-person pile-up under a disco ball. Strobe lights made it impossible to see. The music was so loud you could not hear anyone screaming, "Look out!" And yet, we did it. Every weekend. Places like Skateland were packed wall-to-wall with teens trying to reenact Saturday Night Fever on wheels. The DJ shouted into a microphone while people crashed into snack bars and walls. Couples tried to hold hands and skate romantically. They almost always fell. It did not matter. You got up, brushed off the glitter, and jumped right back into the groove. Sometimes you left with a bruised knee or a sprained wrist, but in the moment, under the colored lights with that funky bass line playing, you were unstoppable. Just pray your outfit survived the fall, and maybe wear a helmet next time. You remember the pin. You ever hold a notebook and feel like it was burning your hands? That was a slam book. It looked innocent. Lined paper, spiral binding, maybe a few stickers. But inside, chaos. Questions like, who's the cutest? Who has the worst breath? What's your biggest secret? Filled every page. And the answers? Anonymous. Or so we said. You knew who wrote what. You always knew. It was petty and thrilling, like a middle school soap opera you could carry in your backpack. Every page turned felt like peeling back the layers of someone's real thoughts, sometimes yours. Passing that book around during lunch or between classes felt like handling a live bomb. One wrong answer, and friendships were over. But you still read every page. You had to, even if it hurt. Even if it was about you, especially if it was about you. And if your crush wrote something about someone else? Heartbreak. Right there in blue ink. Slam books were messy, mean, and magnetic. They lived in backpacks and lockers and sometimes disappeared for weeks, only to reappear with 20 new entries. Teachers hated them. Parents feared them. But for a moment, they were everything. They held the drama of a whole semester. You remember this. CB radios were more than trucker toys. They were a direct line into an unseen world. In the 1970s, everyone wanted one. From long-haul drivers to suburban teens, the airwaves buzzed with chatter, codes, and nicknames. It was the internet before the internet, except it smelled like motor oil and lived in glove compartments. Citizens band radios turned anyone into a voice on the road, a personality on the move. You had a handle, not a name. You learned to say Breaker 19 and ask for a 1020. It was cryptic, cool, and weirdly intimate. There was magic in being anonymous, but still known. On those scratchy frequencies, your words mattered more than your face. For kids, it felt like being part of a secret club. For parents, it was safety and social life combined. The CB craze went nationwide, fueled by trucker movies, novelty songs, and a hunger for connection. People shared recipes, gave weather reports, even fell in love. And then, as suddenly as it came, it faded. Static returned, antennas came down. But ask anyone who ever had one, and they remember. The hum, the jargon, the thrill of being heard by a stranger miles away. Why did we stop talking when it was finally so easy to listen? Hip-hop was born in the Bronx, but in the 80s, it exploded into every corner of American life. It was not just a sound, it was a movement. And when Run DMC hit the stage in Adidas tracksuits and shell-toe sneakers, you knew the world was about to change. This was more than music. It was poetry over beats, rhythm over silence, truth over noise. The 80s marked hip-hop's rise from underground parties to global power. LL Cool J, Public Enemy, Grandmaster Flash. These were not just rappers. They were messengers. Each lyric felt like a coded message from the streets, a heartbeat from the city itself. Hip-hop spoke about struggle, pride, injustice, and survival in a way that made you stop, listen, and feel. And the style? Just as fierce. Gold chains, Kangol hats, boom boxes on shoulders. This was fashion with purpose. The look was bold, but the voice behind it was louder. Breakdancing hit sidewalks like fire. Graffiti tagged the city with identity. And everywhere you turned, the bass dropped like a gavel. Hip-hop turned sneakers into icons and turned raw truth into chart toppers. It did not ask for a seat at the table. It built its own table, right there on the pavement. And anyone who came of age in the 80s knew they were witnessing the rise of a new American language, one that still speaks volumes. The Easy Bake Oven was not a toy. It was a rite of passage, a small, pastel-colored appliance that turned powdered mix into warm, edible cake using nothing but a light bulb. And somehow, that tiny miracle made you feel like a real chef. It was introduced earlier, but by the 1970s, every kid wanted one. Boys, girls, it did not matter. The Easy Bake Oven was your ticket to independence. You measured, you mixed, you waited. That soft hum of the bulb heating up your mini metal pan was suspense in its purest form. Would it bake right? Would it burn? Would Mom let you make another? The cakes were not good. They were dry, crumbly, and oddly sweet. But no one cared, because they were yours. You did not help Mom. You did not watch someone else. You baked it. That mattered. It was messy. It was thrilling. It was a small slice of adulthood you could claim all for yourself. And every time you opened that tiny oven door and pulled out a crooked, half-baked cupcake, you were not just making dessert. You were making memories. You were learning to take pride in the process, even when the result was barely edible. If you have never adjusted an old television antenna, you do not know struggle. The picture was fuzzy. The sound was crackly. The solution? Aluminum foil and some deeply committed arm acrobatics. You would wrap the foil around the rabbit ears, bend them in every direction, and pray you landed somewhere between static and sitcom. Someone always stood next to the TV, holding the antenna at a weird angle, because that was the only position that worked. Watching MASH turned into a family project. Do not move! You had the signal! Go back! Even pets learned not to walk past the television during important scenes. On a good day, you might get 3 channels. On a great day, the weather was just right to pick up a 4th. But that 4th channel came with ghost images and a high-pitched whine. Still, we watched. Why? Because we earned it. Because we fought for it. Tin foil was not just kitchenware, it was broadcast gold. It was the Wi-Fi booster of its time. And somehow, it made you feel like an engineer just for making All in the Family come in clear. That little blinking light could make your heart race. If you saw it flashing, you knew someone called. And maybe it mattered. Answering machines were like tiny time machines. Voices from hours ago waited for you, rewound and saved on a little cassette. You had to hit play. You had to listen in order. There was no skipping ahead, no transcripts, just raw voice. You heard the message exactly as it was meant to be heard. Maybe your friend called to confirm plans. Maybe your crush called and chickened out halfway through. Maybe your mom's voice was on there, reminding you to take the chicken out of the freezer. Messages had real texture, static, breaths, background noise. You could hear the moment someone hesitated or got nervous or ran out of time. Hey, it's me. Call me back, okay? Then click. The tape would eventually wear out. Messages would get eaten by the machine. But for a while, they lived there. Snippets of life, frozen in magnetized plastic. You remember this. Avocado green and harvest gold were not just colors, they were declarations. Open any refrigerator, oven, or blender in the 1970s, and you would find these bold, earthy hues staring back at you. They were not subtle. They were not sleek. But they were everywhere. Kitchens did not look like laboratories back then. They looked warm, lived in, human. These appliances matched the shag carpet, the dark wood paneling, the linoleum that curled in the corners. But more than their color, they represented a specific dream. A dream of the modern American family. Self-sufficient, stylish, and optimistic. They made your kitchen feel alive, even when all you had was boxed cake mix and powdered milk. You were not just making dinner, you were living in a palette that promised better days. The colors came from nature, or at least someone's memory of it. They were meant to calm, to ground, to connect. Now we call them outdated. We ripped them out during remodels, but at the time, they were cutting edge. If you grew up with an avocado fridge, you can still picture it humming in the corner, stocked with soda in glass bottles and leftovers wrapped in foil. These machines outlasted their trend. Some still work. What does it say that the appliances lasted longer than the dream they were sold with? It started with 6 colors, just 6. But somehow, it unlocked a puzzle that would challenge millions of minds and define an era. The Rubik's Cube was not just a toy. It was an obsession, a flex, a frustration, and a badge of honor, all crammed into a twisting, clicking square. You either solved it or you peeled the stickers off. There was no in-between. Classrooms, kitchens, and family living rooms were all temporary battlegrounds for who could line up the colors first. It looked simple, but it demanded patience, logic, and a kind of determination that made it feel like a test of character. And oh, the speed solvers, like magicians, like gods. The cube became a status symbol among kids and a stress toy for adults. It was everywhere: commercials, competitions, cereal box giveaways. You were not cool if you had not at least tried to conquer it. For a moment, the Rubik's Cube was the brainy heart of the decade, a symbol of what it meant to be smart and stylish. It taught an entire generation to keep twisting, keep trying, and keep believing that order could come from chaos. Stretch Armstrong was every kid's first lesson in pushing limits. At first glance, he looked like an ordinary blonde-haired action figure in wrestling trunks. But once you grabbed his arms and started pulling, the magic began. Stretch could extend over 3 feet and still return to his original shape. And that blew kids' minds. In a decade filled with rigid plastic toys, Stretch was soft, heavy, and squishy, a living stress ball you could battle, bend, and battle again. Every child who had one eventually asked the same question: how far can he go before he breaks? Some froze him, some boiled him, some tied him to door handles and pulled. Most Stretch Armstrongs met tragic ends, with oozy red gel leaking out like a horror movie. But it was all part of the experience. He was a science experiment you could hug. And even if he only lasted a summer, the memory stayed. He was not just a toy, he was a challenge, an obsession. And for many 1970s kids, Stretch Armstrong was the first thing they ever tested to destruction just to see what would happen. That weird, heavy feeling in your hands, that was resilience. That was curiosity. That was pure childhood. If you have ever heard a duck sing in falsetto, then you already know too much. Disco Duck was a 1976 novelty song performed in a Donald Duck voice, and it hit #1 on the charts. Yes, a duck, doing disco, and people loved it. It played at school dances, skating rinks, house parties. You could not escape its quack-fueled funk. The guy behind it, Rick Dees, was a radio DJ who accidentally created the most delightfully absurd hit of the decade. The song had dance moves. The duck had fans. It was bizarre and brilliant all at once. And honestly, it made total sense in the 1970s. This was a time when a talking frog could sell coffee and a grown man in a polyester suit could be a sex symbol. A disco duck was just part of the natural order. Kids sang it, adults danced to it, and no one questioned why a feathered voice was narrating their nightlife. It was catchy, it was camp, and it was exactly what the world needed in a decade that thrived on weird. The best part? You can still find the record in vintage shops like a tiny piece of audio chaos waiting to quack again. No one was ready. Not the music industry, not the public, not even the moon, which he would soon walk across. In 1982, Michael Jackson released Thriller, a title that would come to define the very heartbeat of pop culture. This was not just an album, it was a tidal wave. Every track felt like it could carry its own legacy, but it was the music video, the short film really, that sent shockwaves through every living room in America. Red leather jackets, ghoulish dance moves, Vincent Price's eerie monologue echoing into a generation's dreams. It was scary. It was sexy. It was genius. Thriller redefined what a pop star could be. Michael was no longer just a singer. He was a world builder, a visual storyteller, a phenomenon. He shattered racial barriers on MTV, igniting a cultural shift that went beyond music. Parents, kids, teens, grandmothers, everyone danced, everyone watched. Thriller became a global obsession, and suddenly Halloween had a new anthem: the glove, the lean, the laugh. It was not just entertainment, it was an event. To be alive in the 80s was to live in the shadow of Thriller. And to this day, nothing has ever moved quite like it. If any of these loud, scrappy, unforgettable 80s moments brought back that old feeling, drop your favorite memory in the comments, like this video like you are slapping a VHS into the player, and hit subscribe so you never miss another rewind to the good stuff.